Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton Curry and Big C. This is Charlton and Big C talking sports. We do it every day, Monday through Friday at the 5 o'clock p.m. hour, Pacific Standard Time. And Big C, I love the world of sports. We have March Madness happening right now. We have people talking about the NFL draft, and we know NBA basketball is in the thick of things. There's less than 20 games left for everybody else. And today's show is on March the 17th, 2016, and is sponsored by Cadillac of Northern California. Go see your Northern California Cadillac dealers. Test drive the Escalade. It's big, it's powerful, it's luxurious, and tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. And Big C, we know Chris Rock started off about 3 weeks ago at the Oscars talking about race in Hollywood and all the things we want to talk about. But we know we talked about politics as well and how everything relates to sports, whether it's Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. But one thing that never goes away is the fact that Hollywood resembles sports. And when we think about some of the great Hollywood movies and actors, I think of Bill Murray with Caddyshack. He's always at the Pebble Beach with the actors and also the athletes. What are your thoughts on Caddyshack and Bill Murray and his expert acting experience, Big C?
Well, not just Caddyshack. He's a diehard Cub fan, Charlton. Bill Murray is from the south side of Chicago, you know, where the Blues Brothers were when they were on Saturday Night Live.
That's right.
And, you know, he's always been around. He's a Bear fan. He's a diehard there. But you'll always see him at Cub games wearing the Cub hats. I've seen him sing with Harry Carey back in the day during his lifetime.
Yes.
But Caddyshack was one of those front runners in golf films that, you know, gave all the insight of those who had and had not in the game of golf. And Bill Murray, who played groundskeeper there, was just obsessed with getting this squirrel that he could never get. And you also had...
I think that squirrel is still running around.
Huh?
I think that squirrel is still running around in the ground.
He blew up out of the golf course trying to get him. You know, Chevy Chase was in that movie, and, you know, he was the lead in that movie. But it was an excellent movie of the day.
Well, also, when you think of other great movies, and the reason we bring this up is because we know that the contracts are so high. And for whether it's football, basketball, baseball, I mean, baseball, they have the best negotiations because you can bat 300 and make $25 to $30 million a year. But another great movie, speaking of baseball, Field of Dreams, Kevin Costner. He talked about when you build it, the people will come. Now, we've seen great arenas being constructed all over the country in the past 20 years. And the owners are making money hand over fist. So I think Kevin Costner kind of had a vision. You build it, people will come. He's done everything right, Big C.
Well, you know, Kevin Costner's been one of the great monarchs in Hollywood. You look at his array of films that he's done. He's covered the spectrum as far as what he does. But the sports movie, Field of Dreams, was a marvelous movie where he was trying to get in touch with his dad, Charlton, and you know, reliving the past. And all these old-time baseball players came back. Ray Liotta was in the movie. James Earl Jones.
Yeah.
You know, some great actors were in that movie, Field of Dreams. But you know,
well, you just said James.
Work that he's done.
You just said James Earl Jones. You just said James Earl Jones, Big C. Don't mean to cut you off, but I gotta acknowledge the voice, the thunderous voice of James Earl Jones. And go right ahead, Big C.
Well, he's the voice of CNN. Whenever you turn on CNN News, you'll hear this is CNN. That's James Earl Jones. Also, he was the voice of Darth Vader.
Yeah.
You know, one of the most menacing figures in the history.
The baddest dude in the universe.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's thinking about that. It's all relating to sports. And for people that think that Hollywood is separate from sports, it is not. Some of the best.
They're synonymous, Charlton. They're synonymous with each other. You know, everybody in Hollywood, if you look at a Lakers game, Charlton, what do you see in the first two rows at a Lakers game?
I see Jack. I see Jack.
I mean, it's like a casting call, you know, when you have a Lakers game back, especially like when they had Showtime.
Yeah.
When you had Shaq and Kobe.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the hardest seat to get. Even when you look at a Knicks game and you don't see the Knicks winning, you see the royalty of New York as far as acting and entertainment. They're in the front row, and it's become universal in the basketball arenas, Charlton, that people want to be involved. Celebrities want to be involved with celebrities. As we say, you know, you want to be around the people who live in your neighborhood.
Well, speaking of neighborhood, now this is a guy you may not want to have in your neighborhood based on his acting, because he's a bad boy, but he's one of the most talented actors that I've ever seen, and that's the great Al Pacino. I love him the most for Scarface, but he also had a sports movie, and I believe it was called Any Given Sunday with Cameron Diaz, Big C.
Yes, he did. And Jamie Foxx was the quarterback in that film. And, he was a quarterback that had been suspended by the league and looking for a chance to get back in. But Jamie Foxx, in that movie played a powerful role, as well as Al Pacino. And when you look at the gamut that Al Pacino has played in his acting career, from The Godfather, movies like that on up to
The Godfather,
and Justice for All, Dog Day Afternoon. He's one of the great actors of Hollywood. We all know him for Scarface, but as far as the work that he's done nothing but quality work over time, and he has stood the test of time in Hollywood, Charlton.
Well, I tell you, when you think about that, and it goes back to all the great things we've heard about acting in Hollywood. I think even Lee Corso, the great Burt Reynolds, I love, one of the favorite movies that I had was Jackie Gleason with Burt Reynolds. And so we know so many great actors that have played sports in their past, but also they got into the movie business. Jim Brown was one of those as well, as Big C.
Well, you talk about actors. You think about Bruce Willis. We spoke about him last night.
Yeah.
And I remember he played a role with Damon Wayans in The Last Boy Scout, where Damon was a quarterback that had been playing for the L.A. Stallions, in this Victorial movie and everything. And Bruce Willis was a former CIA agent, and they ended up getting together trying to spoil a ring where they were trying to blow up the Coliseum where the team was playing, for the insurance money.
Well, insurance money, I can't believe that people would do things for insurance money. And speaking of insurance money, this segment is also sponsored by BMW. Go see your NorCal BMW dealer. Test drive the ultimate driving machine. If you want a futuristic car, you have to look at the i8. I believe one of the Golden State Warriors, Draymond Green, pulled up in the parking lot with the new i8. They also have the 1 Series, the 3 Series, the 4, 5, 6, and I love the 7 Series. I also drive the 750 BMW. Go see your BMW dealers of Northern California. Tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. Now, one more thing, Big C, I want to get on before we get into the world of sports, because we have a lot of football to cover. One more thing that I think is so important in the world of politics, and we have people deciding who they want to vote to be our next president of the United States. I appreciate the job that President Barack Obama has done, but I want to just bring this up because it also relates to sports. When I look at someone in the world of sports, we talked about March Madness and politics. Now, what's going to get the most attention? Is it March Madness or is it the election? Well, it's a billion-dollar industry, and I really don't get into March Madness until we get into the Sweet 16. But touch on the money thing, and it's going to carry us into the next segment. What a money grab they're making with these players that are playing without compensation, Big C.
Well, these universities are going to get very well compensated, Charlton, here during March Madness. As we talked about, the coaches have incentives in their contracts for reaching March Madness.
Yeah.
And every round that they reach, they get paid a little more. The players might get to go through the drive-thru at McDonald's or Wendy's or something like that, but that's the extent of the compensation that they're going to get.
Hey, McDonald's gives you a lot of money for a $2 burger. A lot of food goes a long way with $2.
But when you think about the amount of money, and especially when the university is rewarded with the compensation that they're going to get for reaching March Madness, at this point, this is when you ought to look at compensating some of the players.
Yeah.
Even in the bowl games on the college football level. You think about the plethora of bowl games that they have out there now, Charlton. That's something that you need to look at, is dispersing some of the money to some of the players.
Yeah.
Even if it's on a unilateral level, you got to find a way to compensate these players above the table, not below the table, as they've been getting over the years. So when we look at March Madness and the billions of dollars that's going to be paid out through television revenue, through CBS, TNT, ESPN, Charlton,
ESPN, Deportes.
There has to be a way to stop getting this free labor from these players.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. You mentioned all the networks that are covered, and I also want to say hi to our Latin American followers. I picked up several people on Twitter from Latin America, also some from England, as well as Canada.
What should we say? Bienvenidos?
Bienvenidos. Welcome to Charlton and Big C Sports. But now this is something I want to talk about. It's kind of a lightning rod of a topic, so I hope it doesn't offend people. But I just looked at the paper. It was former Michigan State basketball player Mateen Cleaves. Now, he was arraigned in Flint, Michigan on sexual assault charges. 38 years old. Now, he's denying what happened. But I just want people to understand, there's a quarterback for the Denver Broncos that just traded to the Houston Texans, an Osweiler. And he was a backup to John Elway for the Super Bowl last year. I think he played in 5 games and they benched him. But he was going to go from $45 million to Denver with John Elway keeping him on. This incident comes up where he pushes a woman. It's on camera, pushed her twice. He's walking out with pizza. And some people were saying, well, he's trying to protect his wife. This 6'7" man is trying to protect his wife from a 5'3" woman. And he pushed the woman twice. It was caught on camera. No talk whatsoever outside of maybe 30 minutes on I believe it was CBS or one of the sports networks. They've let this guy off with no talk whatsoever. Mateen Cleaves is in the paper. They both have the presumption of innocence, Big C, but one is on tape and one is not. Your thoughts on that again, Big C?
Well, Charlton, as I've talked about and reiterated over the past couple of months, there's a current NFL quarterback that 3 years ago was accused of a sexual misconduct act up at Lake Tahoe. Okay?
Yeah.
Lake Tahoe. 11 months later, he was accused of doing the same heinous act in a bathroom at a bar in Atlanta, Georgia.
Wow.
11 months later, within the same fiscal year. And not once was charges brought against him. Not once was any sanctions by the NFL levied on him for these alleged acts.
Yeah.
He was never arrested. So there's a double standard. If I'm a white quarterback in the NFL, I have autonomy to do basically anything I want in public or in private. But if I'm an African-American athlete or a former African-American athlete,
yeah,
I'm going to be hung. You know, I'm going to be laid out to dry in the media.
The media has
Everybody's going to blast me all over the place.
Yeah.
And they're not going to turn a blind eye like they do against a white quarterback pushing a woman or a white quarterback accused of sexual misallegation.
Well, see, we just talked about that too, and that it's a shame that Mateen Cleaves is all over the paper. You do have the presumption of innocence. No one saw what happened on tape. But here's a guy on tape and everyone's talking about it didn't exist. So as we transition into the next segment, and man, this goes by so fast, I just want to mention that this segment is also sponsored by your Northern California Ford dealer. They build cars that are built Ford tough. If you want to drive one of the better vehicles made over the past 30 years, you have to go by your Northern California Ford dealer and test drive the new Ford F-150 for safety, reliability, and dependability. Tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. In Charlton and Big C, we talk so many things about sports. We call it Real Talk, Big C. And I want to thank all of our...
Charlton, that's all this is. This is real talk. It's not watered down. It's not soft. This is not a pillow fight, okay?
It's not a pillow fight.
Real, glove, knuckle sports, okay?
Well, when you say that, I just want people to understand the lightning rod behind it. Because we have Colin Kaepernick now. Colin Kaepernick, we've been on him all year about how good of a talent he is. But the media in Northern California, they've been trying to get rid of only 3 quarterbacks that have gone to the Super Bowl for the 49ers. He's the third one. He went to the NFC Championship game back-to-back, and for some reason, Balky tried to get rid of him when they got rid of Harbaugh. But he's a talent, and they're trying to find Blaine Gabbert, etc. Well, ironically, in the San Jose newspaper, just yesterday, actually, Coach Kelly, who I believe the reason he came to San Francisco is because of Kaepernick, he says he's ready to coach the heck out of Colin Kaepernick. Now, why are these great coaches, even John Elway's trying to get him in Denver, what do they see that Balky doesn't see in the media that jumps behind Gabbert, who's never even been to a Super Bowl, let alone a playoff game, Big C? Your thoughts on that?
It's hard for Blaine Gabbert to get out of practice, Charlton, let alone get out of a game, okay? Let's be realistic about that. You know, Colin Kaepernick knows the NFL.
Yeah.
He knows how to defeat teams in the NFL. He has played at the highest level. You know, he's like many other quarterbacks that have had a hiccup for a few games. He had that. But it wasn't all of his fault in San Francisco. Charlton, when you get rid of 8 of the defensive players that have played with you in the NFC Championship game, you no longer have this stalwart defense that can stop people to give you good field position. When you lose all of your wide receivers and you only have Anquan Bolden, Davis was hurt at tight end, Gore was gone at running back, you lost 3 offensive linemen. What did you have as a staple of a team? All you had was a quarterback that was running for his life because he had receivers that couldn't get open. He had linemen that couldn't block for him. He had a second-year running back that couldn't recognize the blitz, but it was all Colin Kaepernick's fault.
Yeah.
Management drafted all of those players and signed those players and put them in the position, and they couldn't play. So they blamed Kaepernick for the ineptitude. They hired a coach that knew nothing about coaching, paid him $14.1 million, and tried to put the blame on Kaepernick. And yet this coach had no leadership skills. Players didn't follow him, Charlton.
Yeah, Tom Sula was more of a defensive-minded guy, but they tried to fill in the gap when Harbaugh was chased out of town, and that's the problem with the organization. Now, I look at what Kelly's trying to do with Kaepernick. He knows he has a player that can get them back into the playoffs. But you're right, Big C. You have to build an offensive line around it. But I just hope that people will start realizing Joe Montana's not coming back. And Steve Young is not coming back. We had a 49er on the program when we were at Salem Media, and he actually snapped the ball for Joe Montana and Steve Young. And he talked about the fact that Joe Montana was easier to block for because you knew where he was. He wasn't going to run around too much. Steve Young, because he's so athletic, he would get outside of the pocket. But he also led the 49ers to a Super Bowl. That was 1995. Well, Kaepernick comes on the scene, replacing Alex Smith, the same kind of talent that Steve Young is, just bigger, stronger, and faster. And I think Kelly sees that in him, and that's why Kelly wants to keep him around so much. Even Hugh Jackson, who's a coach at Cleveland, when they were going to get rid of Kaepernick, he decided to get out of here, go to Cleveland. He's even trying to get Kaepernick to come to Cleveland. So Chip Kelly obviously knows what he's talking about, Big C.
Well, I listen to John Gruden a lot, Charlton, and he talk about NFL-ready quarterbacks, okay?
Right.
The most NFL-ready quarterbacks that are out there that are available.
Yeah.
You got to start with Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
He's the most NFL-ready quarterback to go in and give a team success right off the back. RG3 is going to be too.
Yeah.
Everybody is real high on this kid, Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
Out of North Dakota State, okay? Division III talent. Now, you got to understand the people that he is playing against week in and week out, even though he won 2 national championships, Charlton, are not NFL-caliber players. He's not playing against NFL-caliber defensive backs.
Are you saying they never played Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, LSU, Notre Dame, USC? You're talking about those kind of players, Big C?
Well, maybe so, Charlton. They might have been able to play against the practice squad on those teams week in and week out, all right? But when you look at NFL ready, he physically, he looks the role.
Yeah.
If you're talking about NFL ready, and I know Gruden was raving about him winning 2 national championships at North Dakota State.
Yeah.
There's a backup quarterback in the NFL that went in the 5th round a couple years ago.
Yeah.
That won 2 national championships. A.J. McCarron. So
out of Alabama.
Out of Alabama. So is he more NFL ready than A.J. McCarron because he won 2 Division III championships? And A.J. McCarron won 2 NCAA championships. So when you talk about those parallels, they don't compute because 5 years ago, John Gruden said the same thing about a quarterback we just got through talking about, Blaine Gabbert.
Yeah.
He said Blaine Gabbert was the most NFL ready. Blaine Gabbert in his time in Jacksonville, his 3.5 years.
Wait, hold on. John Gruden said that?
John Gruden said Blaine Gabbert was more NFL ready than a Cam Newton.
So why'd they trade him from Jacksonville?
Why did he only win 5 games as a starter in Jacksonville? That may be the reason. Might have a little bit to do with it, Charlton. If you can only win 5 games in 3.5 years as a starting quarterback and a number 5 overall draft pick in the NFL.
Yeah.
That kind of, I think the label they put on that is bust.
I think they call it bust. Well, I tell you, I interviewed John Gruden back in '98 at the Coliseum. And I remember how Al Davis, they never really got along. And, I've always respected John Gruden, but sometimes even people in that position, they want to say the right thing because they want to get the interview. But if anyone can follow football knowledge, you can't tell me that Gabbert is the kind of quarterback that Cam Newton is or someone that Colin Kaepernick is.
He's not even the quarterback that Andy Dalton. And Andy Dalton went in the 2nd round that year, Charlton. Andy Dalton out of TCU should have went before Blaine Gabbert, but he went to the 2nd round of Cincinnati. We've seen the success of Andy Dalton. Now, the 3 quarterbacks have been most successful out of that draft. Cam Newton, Colin Kaepernick, Andy Dalton. Okay?
Yeah.
Blaine Gabbert is an afterthought. No one remembers him.
Well, I think you're right, Big C. In fact, Hugh Jackson, he rated him coming out of Nevada, along with Cam Newton as 2 of the top can't-miss quarterbacks. And so when I look at Chip Kelly, and a lot of people were saying, well, maybe Chip Kelly is not the right guy for the job here, But I think Chip Kelly is the right guy. He was fired in Philadelphia by having a winning record. Just because they didn't go to the playoffs every year or didn't get to a Super Bowl, it doesn't mean that he can't coach. One more thing, and I know we talk old school to new school. You're more the old school, I'm the new school. A lot of players complain that he had them running too much. They had to get in shape.
You need to stop talking about my age, man.
Is that age discrimination going on, Big C?
Hey, I got my AARP card. I'm not ashamed of that.
Well, one of the best announcers when we talk about evaluating players, I remember I met Howard Cosell when I was a young boy. And Howard Cosell was the face or the voice of Monday Night Football. Frank Gifford, same thing. When I look at how many great athletes have come through the San Francisco Bay Area over the last 20 and 30 years, starting from Gene Washington all the way to Colin Kaepernick, the Bay Area it's just a hotbed of talent, professional sports teams from the Warriors and the A's and the Raiders and the Giants and the 49ers. They've all won championships. So for an area that's accustomed to championships, it's amazing they don't realize when you have a guy that took you to the Super Bowl and you're trying to push him out. I just don't understand that. So before we go to the next segment, Big C, I just want to get your thoughts again. What does Colin Kaepernick need from Skip Kelly to be effective the way he was with Jim Harbaugh, Big C?
Only thing he needs from Chip Kelly is what he had from Jim Harbaugh. A coach that believes in you, Charlton. The talent is there on both sides. Chip Kelly has the talent of mind awareness to understand what Colin Kaepernick can do for his organization. When he went to the Philadelphia Eagles, he tried to do a little bit of that drop-back style passing.
Yeah.
But it didn't work completely. When he had Nick Foles throwing the ball, Foles was successful, but Foles was mobile. Then he put Bradford in. Bradford had no mobility. You know, he was like a piece of cheesecloth and tossed out there looking for him to crumble. But now that you got Colin Kaepernick, and when you go back and look at the system that he had at Oregon with a Mariota and quarterbacks like that, mobile quarterbacks that can throw on the run, they can also tuck it and run. That's what he's bringing back to San Francisco. You know, Tom Azula did not know how to coach Kaepernick last year. He didn't even know how to coach Gabbert when he was in the lineup. As you said, he was a defensive mind talking about coming in, trying to run an offense in the NFL. He should have stayed on the defensive side and hired an offensive coordinator, Charlton. That's what you do. You don't try to put the square peg into the round hole, and that's how the 49ers missed it last year.
Well, let me ask you this question. I know you're somewhat of a historian when it comes to sports, whether it's college or pro. When I think of Al Davis, how he helped the leagues merge back in the 60s, and he's taken quarterbacks like Jim Plunkett to the Super Bowl. He's had people that knew how to play the game. The King of the Snake Stabler, another Super Bowl. Also, when you think about if we could just get in the mind of what Al Davis would have done with a player that other people tried to push off, because you know Plunkett was pushed out of several NFL programs before he got him in Oakland. What would he do with a guy like Colin Kaepernick, Big C? How would he build that organization back?
Charlton, ironically, Jim Plunkett came to the Raiders from the 49ers. If you go back and remember, Monty Clark was the coach in San Francisco at the time, and he didn't feel a need for Jim Plunkett. He let him go, and he ended up with the Raiders. Only thing the Raiders got out of that, Charlton, were 2 Super Bowl victories from Jim Plunkett. So it lets you know when you have the right mindset in management or a head coach, you know players who fit your scheme. And that's what Al Davis knew from Jim Plunkett, that he fit his scheme, that he was a cast off from other places, but he had the talent and the skills to play high NFL football. And that's what Colin Kaepernick is. Where are you going to go out on the free agency market, Charlton, or in the draft and find a quarterback that has been to the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
You're just not going to find it. Find a quarterback, Charlton, that has been to back-to-back NFC championship games. That's not available because all of those guys, other organizations, Charlton, keep them under contract.
But you know what? The 49ers, Balky's found that guy, and they're trying to get rid of him. I think, San Francisco and the Silicon Valley is kind of wine country, not that far from Napa. I think too many guys are spending a lot of time in Napa as they go to evaluate some of their players. So I hope Chip Kelly can turn things around because there's great following winning programs, especially in Northern California.
Charlton, just because you're rich don't mean that you don't do and can't do stupid things, okay?
Hey, rich is good, though. I don't mind being rich. It's a good thing. We don't mind his money. Jerry Jones has proven that money can buy championships, too, but he's also shown that they can run players out of town. In the next few minutes of the program, Big C, I just want to touch on this NBA beat that's going on here in Northern California. The Golden State Warriors setting the world on fire. Steph Curry had his 28th birthday just over the week. They are now 61-6. But even with that, guys like Charles Barkley, they think that San Antonio can beat them. They're 57-10. That's a marquee matchup coming up on Saturday down in the great state of Texas in San Antonio. Last night against the New York Knicks, which used to be a great organization, Curry went for 34 points, and Golden State extended their winning streak. I mean, they're 61-6 now. They're on pace, one game ahead of the 95-96 Bulls. Your thought on Curry, again, his performance, never get tired of it, Big C.
Well, Charlton, when you look at Curry, the one thing the NBA fans haven't gotten a chance to see with Curry this year is him play the fourth quarter consistently, okay?
Yeah, he sat out last night.
And there's a reason for that, is that they have such a lead going into the fourth quarter that 34 games this year, he hasn't even played in the fourth quarter, Charlton. He sit down and rested, basically. If he played the fourth quarter, because based on minutes right now, he'd be averaging just under 55 points a game in the fourth quarter. When you look at him statistically, he's shooting 54% from the three in the fourth quarter in the limited time that he has.
Yeah.
So the reason why all these players are throwing it out after Steph Curry, they don't realize he's not playing in the fourth quarter. If he played the fourth quarters, he'd be averaging about 42, 44 points a game this year, Charlton.
When you talk about
there's a bit of envy from the older players that are no longer in the game.
Yeah.
They're sitting back and see how he does it so effortlessly. Yeah, I can't even talk to
No, it's okay. He got me going, too.
He's just a great player. He's the icon. He's the face of the NBA because he does nothing wrong, Charlton. You don't see him in the newspaper being pulled over for a DUI. You don't hear about his gambling troubles in Vegas. You don't hear about him.
Are you saying that some athletes have gambling troubles down in Vegas?
I'm saying some former athletes have some gambling problems. They'll bet on how long the game going. You know it's only 48 minutes on the clock.
Let's not talk about the 95-96 Bulls, okay? We'll get into one more thing. The OKC Thunder last night, 130-109 over the Boston Celtics. Durant went for 28 points. Now keep this in mind. Durant scored 20 points. He scored 20 points or more in the 60 of 61 games. Is that a clue that he should get the ball more, Big C?
Well, Charlton, he had 17 in the first quarter. So when, the Thunder goes as Durant goes, he has the most 20-point games this season in the NBA.
Yeah.
Most consecutive. He has 42 consecutive 20-point games, 20-plus point games. So if they run through Durant, Oklahoma City would be a much better team than what they are.
Yeah.
But they struggle because Westbrook feels he should share the spotlight.
Yeah. Russell's known to do that. He's known to do that.
Russell's going to get his shots. I don't care who's on the floor.
Well, we know that Russell Westbrook, I mean, he's a talent, though. The guy's athletic, should be a great defensive back in football. Also around the NBA, the Clippers 122-106 over the Rockets. DeAndre Jordan, Big C, 23 points, 14 rebounds for the Clippers. What are your thoughts on him? 8 for 8 from the floor.
Yeah, but see, 7 of those are dunks, Charlton. So, he can't help but shoot a high shooting percentage. Anything outside the paint, DeAndre Jordan's going to have trouble. But, that was a great game by him.
Yeah.
He's one of the great defensive players in the NBA. He's a shot blocker. He can clog up the middle. And when he plays consistently, the Clippers have a chance. But he can't run with Golden State. San Antonio has 2 big men that they can put against him, which will cause him foul trouble. But, this is a great time of the year in basketball. We have March Madness. We got less than 20 games to play in the NBA, Charlton.
Yeah.
Everybody is sitting on the edge of their seat, and the back of it doesn't get warm anymore.
Well, thinking of getting warm, Barry Bonds at 51 years old, he's batting practice down for the Miami Marlins, and he hit a couple of home runs. Now, a lot of people realize this guy's 51. He was hitting home runs when he was in his 30s. But what a great season. As you talk about baseballs coming into the bigs now, spring training. I'm looking at the San Francisco Giants, my pick for getting back to the World Series. We know that the Royals are also going to be strong in Kansas City, but a great time of year for all kinds of sports. But what I want to finish off, Big C, as we go into this game on Saturday, because everybody is talking about it out here, and we have about 2 minutes left in the program, but Golden State going down to San Antonio. I know that there's a few injuries. Iguodala's injured for Golden State. I personally think they're going to lose that game just because they really don't have to win it. But I think they're going to get San Antonio a few weeks later back in Oakland. Just your thoughts on what we can expect going into the weekend for that big matchup, Big C.
Well, Charlton, neither one of those teams, San Antonio or Golden State, has lost a home game this year.
Yeah.
So home court advantage in the playoffs is very imperative. So I'm kind of siding with you a bit that San Antonio may win this game at home.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be a cakewalk. Golden State is just not going to lay down. They're going to run with them. So for San Antonio to win this game at home,
yeah,
they're going to have to shoot a very high percentage from the floor because Golden State will outshoot you with threes.
Well,
so you're going to have to match that up.
Well, Big C, when you talk about that also, and I'm kind of going against my right mind thinking that Golden State would lose because they did play January 25th in Oakland. The score was Golden State 120, San Antonio 90, a 30-point blowout win. Of course, they didn't have Duncan, but he's not worth 30 points. So when you're right, Big C, if they get into a groove, I don't see anyone beating Golden State, but also Popovich, also referees. I think it's good for basketball if someone can take them and kind of put them back in their place a little bit. But I see these two teams being in the Western Conference Championship, Big C, in the next minute.
Well, I'd love to see them in the NBA Championship. We know that won't happen, but the Western Conference Championship will happen. They're the best two teams in the NBA. Everybody else is just an afterthought. These are the true class of the NBA, Charlton.
Well, I think Popovich, and we also know how great he's been in the great Southwest. But I'm going to tell you, March Madness is great. NFL football is great. Great job with Kelly and Kaepernick. If they could put that together, it might take them rebuilding the offensive line, but look for some good things out of the San Francisco 49ers. And Big C, my goodness, the show is already over. It happens too fast. It always does. And I want to thank everyone for listening in every Monday through Friday at the 5 o'clock p.m. hour Pacific Standard Time with Charlton and Big C. We talk real sports worldwide, and we'll get back to you next week. But also tomorrow we have a lot of interesting things to talk about. You have to wait around to hear that. Again, Charlton and Big C Sports every Monday through Friday, 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we thank you for listening. We appreciate you. Have a super fantastic day.